Mark Twain grew up with a restless curiosity and a sharp, playful mind that seemed constantly alert to the strange, funny, and sometimes unfair details of the world around him, if life itself were a long story begging to be questioned, teased, and carefully retold. He was born in 1835 as Samuel Langhorne Clemens in the small river town of Florida, Missouri, a place shaped by muddy streets, slow routines, and the nearby Mississippi River, which carried not only boats and cargo, but endless stories drifting past curious young eyes. When his family later moved to Hannibal, Missouri, the river became his classroom, his playground, and his imagination's favorite companion, offering scenes of adventure, danger, freedom, and human drama that quietly settled into his memory. Young Sam watched people closely, noticing how adults often said one thing and did another, how rules bent depending on power, and how humor could sneak truth into places where seriousness was not welcome. He loved listening more than speaking at first, absorbing accents, tall tales, arguments, jokes, and gossip, storing them away like treasures he would someday reshape into stories. School felt narrow to him, not because he lacked intelligence, but because memorizing facts could never compete with the excitement of observing real people making real mistakes in real life. When his father died, responsibility arrived early and harshly, pushing Sam out of childhood comfort and into the working world, where he learned quickly that survival required adaptability, wit, and resilience. He worked as a printer's apprentice, surrounding himself with words, ink, and headlines, discovering that language could entertain, provoke, and challenge at the same time. As he sat type and read articles, his mind played constantly, imagining how stories might sound if told more honestly, more humorously, or more sharply than polite society preferred. The Mississippi River kept calling him, promising freedom from routine and an education no school could provide. Determined to answer that call, Sam trained as a steamboat pilot, a job demanding sharp memory, courage, and attention, since one mistake on the river could mean disaster. He learned every bend, current, and hidden danger, developing a deep respect for experience over theory and instinct over instruction. The river taught him more than navigation, because it revealed human nature, all its bravery, foolishness, greed, kindness, and contradiction. When the Civil War disrupted river life, Sam's path shifted again, forcing him to adapt rather than cling to one identity. He traveled west, chasing opportunity and adventure, trying mining, journalism, and storytelling, often failing, sometimes succeeding, but always observing. It was during these wandering years that the name Mark Twain emerged, borrowed from river language and shaped into a voice that sounded both playful and wise. Writing became his way of making sense of chaos, allowing him to turn confusion into clarity and disappointment into comedy. His humor was never empty, because beneath every joke lived careful observation and quiet criticism. He mocked pretension, hypocrisy, and cruelty, not to tear people down, but to reveal truth through laughter. Readers began to recognize something special in his voice, because he sounded honest, human, and refreshingly unafraid. Mark Twain did not write like a gentleman author hiding behind fancy words, but like a storyteller leaning in and speaking directly to you. He wrote about ordinary people facing ordinary problems, revealing how everyday life could be just as dramatic and meaningful as grand historical events. Children appeared often in his stories, not as perfect angels, but as curious, mischievous thinkers navigating a confusing adult world. Through humor, he allowed young readers to feel brave, clever, and understood. Through satire, he invited adults to question their assumptions without feeling attacked. As his confidence grew, his ambition expanded, pushing him to experiment with longer stories and deeper themes. The world he created felt alive, because it was built from careful listening and patient observation. Every joke carried intention, and every exaggeration pointed toward truth. Mark Twain understood that laughter could open minds faster than lectures ever could. His writing balanced fun and seriousness the way the river balanced danger and beauty. He believed that stories should entertain first, because enjoyment invited attention. Once attention was captured, truth could quietly slip in. Success did not soften his sharpness, but sharpened it further. He continued questioning authority, challenging false morals, and poking at foolish certainty. Readers laughed, but they also recognized themselves. Mark Twain's voice grew stronger because it was rooted in experience rather than theory. He wrote not to impress, but to connect. Through every sentence, he invited readers to think while smiling. His journey from river towns to literary fame was never smooth, yet every twist added depth to his perspective. And as his reputation spread, one thing remained clear: because Mark Twain had only begun using humor as a lens to examine the larger, messier truths of human life. As Mark Twain moved deeper into fame, his writing grew bolder and more layered because popularity gave him a wider stage, while his sharp conscience kept whispering that success meant nothing unless it challenged comfort, habit, and the dangerous ease of unthinking belief. The creation of the adventures of Tom Sawyer felt playful on the surface, yet beneath the games, tricks, and riverbank adventures lived careful reflections about freedom, childhood rules, and the strange logic adults often forced upon the young. When Adventures of Huckleberry Finn followed, the story carried even greater weight, because humor now walked alongside questions of race, morality, friendship, and courage, all wrapped inside a boy's voice that sounded simple while quietly exposing deep injustice. Huck's journey down the Mississippi was never only physical, since every bend of the river mirrored a moral choice, forcing readers to consider whether society's rules deserved obedience when compassion pointed elsewhere. Mark Twain understood that letting a child narrator speak honestly could reveal more truth than 100 serious speeches delivered by respected grown-ups. Some readers laughed easily at the jokes, yet others felt uneasy, sensing that the mirror Twain held up to society showed flaws they preferred to ignore. Criticism arrived alongside praise, because satire always unsettles those who rely on certainty and tradition for comfort. Rather than retreat, Twain leaned forward, sharpening his wit, widening his targets, and trusting readers to handle discomfort if it arrived wearing humor. His lectures became theatrical events where storytelling, timing, and expression turned ideas into living performances rather than dry arguments. Travel fed his curiosity further as journeys through Europe, the Middle East, and beyond revealed that human absurdity looked surprisingly similar across cultures, even when clothing, customs, and languages changed. He wrote travel books that felt less like guides and more like conversations, blending observation, exaggeration, and honesty until readers felt they were traveling beside him. Behind the laughter, however, financial struggles and personal loss quietly gathered, reminding Twain that success did not guarantee peace. Business failures drained money, forcing him to write constantly, sometimes under pressure that weighed heavily on his imagination. Tragedy struck closer to home as well, as the loss of loved ones deepened his understanding of grief, vulnerability, and the fragile nature of joy. These darker experiences did not silence his humor, but gave it shadows, depth, and a more reflective edge. His later writing questioned humanity more fiercely, examining cruelty, greed, and self-deception with a tone that mixed sadness, irony, and relentless honesty. Still, he never fully abandoned playfulness, because he believed humor remained the most effective way to keep people listening. Twain's confidence allowed him to challenge religion, politics, and social conventions, topics many writers avoided, especially when audiences expected pleasant entertainment. Some readers resisted, while others felt relieved, grateful that someone dared say what they only whispered privately. Mark Twain became less concerned with being liked and more committed to being truthful. He once believed civilization steadily improved people, but life experience taught him that progress often moved unevenly, dragging old flaws into new shapes. His skepticism grew sharper, yet his compassion deepened, especially for the powerless and misunderstood. Even when his outlook darkened, his sentences remained lively, because he understood that heavy ideas needed light feet to travel far. Children continued reading his stories, sensing adventure and freedom, while adults returned later, discovering meanings that waited patiently beneath the surface. Time proved that his work did not age quickly, because it spoke about human behavior rather than passing fashion. Mark Twain became a voice that crossed generations, cultures, and classrooms, not because he provided simple answers, but because he encouraged questioning. Teachers argued over his books, critics debated their intent, and readers kept returning, drawn by honesty wrapped in wit. His river never stopped flowing because it symbolized movement, choice, and moral navigation more than geography. When he grew older, Twain reflected openly on contradictions, admitting uncertainty rather than pretending wisdom meant certainty. He understood that doubt could be a sign of intelligence, not weakness. Even near the end of his life, his curiosity remained active, questioning authority, habit, and human pride. He believed progress required self-examination, even when it felt uncomfortable. His humor matured into a tool of clarity rather than escape. Mark Twain left behind stories that taught courage without preaching, empathy without softness, and laughter without emptiness. Readers learned that thinking and enjoying could happen at the same time. His legacy endured because he respected his audience, trusting them to laugh, think, and feel together. Though the man passed away, his voice continued speaking, sounding familiar yet challenging, friendly yet sharp, playful yet serious. And as long as people wondered why the world behaved strangely while hoping it could behave better, Mark Twain's stories remained ready, like an old river guiding new travelers through confusing moral waters.